So again, welcome everyone. As I said, I work on the career and professional development team here at Villanova, and we are responsible for delivering career and professional development content to our graduate business student population. And that ranges from everything from professional one-on-one career coaching services to career and professional development programs like networking events, technical like analytics type training, managing mentorship programs, among a lot of other offerings that we provide both virtual and in person. So thrilled to be here today to share with you some information on EQ. As you'll see in the presentation, it's even more valuable when you're in some challenging times that I know we're all experiencing. But before I get started, I also wanted to ask my colleague Rita to introduce herself as well. She's going to help facilitate our breakout sessions today.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I look forward to connecting. I'm helping Lauren today in the presentation. So my role in the office is really, as Lauren mentioned, to provide coaching and programmatic support for our suite of graduate programs at the Villanova School of Business. I have a little over 15 years of coaching experience working in different career development capacities, both at Villanova and other institutions. And again, I'm excited to meet you, help Lauren to facilitate today, and connect.
Thank you, Rita. So again, we'll kick it off and again, a warm welcome to everyone. I know many of you are planning to start in the fall, so just nice to meet everyone. So as we move through, I want to share our agenda today around EQ. It's really becoming not just something that people talk about as a soft skill, but really a differentiator for leaders and teams that see more successful outcomes. So we'll focus on some of that discussion today. So we'll talk about why EQ matters. We'll get into a little bit of the brain science around how it actually works behind the scenes, literally what's going on in your head when you're processing emotions. There's 4 dimensions or skills related to EQ, so we'll talk about each of those and practice some strategies to build up that skill set among our group. And then we'll have some discussions around EQ and leadership, because there's been a lot of research that shows that leaders really, and this isn't surprising, right, but the research backs it, really have almost a contagious effect for better or worse, for positive or negative emotions as far as driving the emotional climate within their teams. So we'll talk about that. And then we want to hear from you. I mean, I think about all the students that I work with in our graduate programs, we know that you all have work experience, personal experiences, and things that really can add to the conversation and bring value to each other as we're learning. So we'll have some time to participate in breakout sessions as well. So to kick it off, I think you chose to spend your time wisely today. And what I mean by that is, when we look at this slide, EQ really does matter. There's been research that it's actually responsible for 58% of your job performance and actually a $29,000 annual salary differential. When studying high performers across a number of different industries and job functions, 90% of top high performers have high EQ. And so what's interesting about that is it's one of those, being smart and working hard can certainly get you there, but it's really EQ that tends to be the boost that people are needed to really reach those top levels and see a lot of career success. So again, I know this is lunch hour for a lot of folks, so hopefully you will find this valuable, as again, the research is really backing up the necessity of EQ, especially when you think about business education and business careers. So let's talk about the brain science and some skills and strategies here. So I read the EQ 2.0 book, and I love this graphic from it. It's a book on emotional intelligence, and it's basically talking about what's going on inside your head. And I think this explains why it's an important topic, and also gives us hope that we can actually improve our EQ skills. So one of the things to mention is that our brains are hardwired to give emotions the upper hand. So no matter your intent or how much self-control or how much distance you try to give emotions, you're always going to experience things emotionally before thinking about them rationally. And the reason this happens is it's literally a brain map. If you look at the map, something happens, a trigger event, something happens, your brain gets these physical signals from your body, right? But it travels from this physical sensation up to the limbic part of your brain. This is where you experience emotions. And then it goes to the frontal part of your brain here, to the frontal lobe, and that's where rational processing happens. So you kind of get information from these signals, it travels through an emotional center, and then it gets to the rational processing part of your brain. So what that means is all of your rational processing is informed by these emotions that are happening to you and that you're experiencing first. The reason I think this slide in particular and this image is so interesting is it really shows some opportunity and also some area for growth. Because when you think about this, if you're experiencing your emotions first, well, one, you don't want to literally just have a rash or gut reaction, right? So there's an element to understanding, having some self-awareness around your emotions, and also understanding, you know, perhaps how to control them so that you can give yourself space to let that rational processing and decision making happen. The other piece is none of us are working in silos, right? So this is going on in our brain, but it's also going on in the brain of our clients, our family members, our coworkers, our friends, our supervisors, our direct reports. So kind of understanding what happens to them as well, and how we can build up our own awareness of their emotions and how to build relationships with them based on an understanding of the own challenges they might be experiencing related to emotion and rational processing. So again, you know, key point here really, it's literally a path. You're literally driving through the emotional center of your brain before you're getting to the rational part. So I think it's a good way to just kind of frame this conversation to really have a sense of what's going on literally inside of your head. Something else I find interesting when I talk about EQ that is really valuable to me is I do a lot of assessments with students. Some of them are personality based, so you've probably heard of the Myers-Briggs, right? It gives you these 4 letters and it tells you, okay, this is your hardwired personality forever. It doesn't really change. It just tells you how you're, you know, default interacting with the world. EQ is different. EQ is a skill. So your brain can actually change. It can form new connections. You can learn new patterns based on different experiences and practice. So I encourage you to think about EQ as a skill, just like if you're kind of good at soccer and you want to practice, you're going to be better at soccer or an instrument or anything else. So again, you have that ability to make changes and build up your skills. Same with presentation skills, anything. So I encourage you to remember that it's a skill, not a personality trait. And because of that, that gives us hope that we actually can make a lot of changes and improvements there. I want to share some definitions as well around EQ. So emotional intelligence, you know, it's something in each of us that's kind of intangible. It affects how we manage behavior, navigate social complexities, and make personal decisions that really achieve positive results. And there's 4 core skills, and we'll talk through them. But these EQ skills have to do with what I was saying before. It's the ability to manage your own emotions, and then your ability to notice and recognize and act on your observations of emotions that are happening in others. So it's really divided into personal competence, so that's kind of what's happening on the inside, and then external facing, which is social competence. Again, I'm saying it's intangible. If you think of people who have really high EQ, you probably just saw them as that person who gets people, right? They're the person who can walk in and just read a room and know if something's up. They're the person, if their friend says, yeah, everything's fine, they know that, like, oh, actually, maybe something isn't fine. So they're just, you know, there are people who really stand out as just having that skill set. But again, EQ, unlike personality traits and things that are more hardwired, are definitely something that can be improved and learned and built upon. What I'm going to do next, I want to talk you through these 4 quadrants, because as I was saying, there's really 4 areas of EQ and they build on each other. And then we're going to get some conversation going in the chat so that you can participate as well. So the first definition is called self-awareness. And so this is really where it starts, right? This is you saying, I'm going to be more aware of my emotions. It's building up the ability to accurately perceive your emotions in the moment and understand your tendencies across a variety of different situations, right? Patterns, habits, triggers. This one is the least likely to change. I've done some work with students on actually taking EQ assessments, and you know, I always get the question, will this area of self-awareness like be impacted if I was in a bad mood or just had an argument or even had a really great day, right? Self-awareness is the one that usually doesn't change. It's pretty stable. But what I find really interesting is only 36% of people can actually do this well. So only 36% of people can actually perceive their own emotions in the moment and really understand what's going on with themselves. But in contrast, and this is where the opportunity lies, 83% of top performers can. So again, there's a real opportunity here. If you're looking to be a top performer, which I imagine you are as you're pursuing graduate business education, this can really be a differentiator for you. So what I'd like to do, and I'm gonna, if you're not as familiar with Zoom, I'm gonna type hello in the chat because it should pop up for everyone. But what I'd like you to do, I'd like to think about, because what you're gonna do with each EQ skill is you're actually gonna work on building up that skill, just like anything. So if you were taking piano lessons, the music teacher is gonna assign you a scale or a workbook or some kind of exercise, right? EQ is the same way. There are different strategies associated with each of the skills that you can use to just build up your skill set and become better at it. So the first thing I'm going to ask everyone to do, we're going to do a little practice as a group in the chat right here, is a strategy that's called feeling an emotion physically. And what this is if you really want to build up your ability to be more self-aware about your emotions, you have to spend time with them. Like you really have to give yourself space to spend time with them and understand your reactions there. So I'll give you an example. I want to have each of you, and I'll share you my example as well, think back to a time you might have been frustrated recently. Always frustrations, like everywhere in all kinds of walks of life, everyone's getting frustrated over something. Think about your frustration. My example is going to be I hate being late. Like I really hate being late and I get frustrated by it. So if like I'm stuck in traffic or if SEPTA is delayed, like even if it's out of my control, I definitely start shallow breathing and I clench my fist like tight. I always do that when I'm frustrated. I've spent a lot of time thinking about this as I facilitate different EQ sessions because this is a good way now for me to know if I start clenching my fists when I'm doing something like unrelated to being stuck in traffic, or I notice I'm not taking normal breaths, it gives me a second to pause and be self-aware and say, wait a second, these are some physical signs that I'm getting frustrated. Like, what's going on? Let's take a deep breath. Let's think about what might be happening here because I have this pattern of how my body is reacting to this particular stress of being frustrated. So I'd like all of you to think about a time you were frustrated in the last week. It could be work, it could be personal, doesn't matter, whatever you're comfortable sharing, and think about what physical signs you had and share them in the chat. So for me, again, I am clenching, I'm a fist clencher, right? I'm clenching my fist. I'm taking shallow breaths. Rita's getting a racing heart and excess energy. What about other folks? What have you experienced when you've been frustrated? And I'll give you guys a second to share in the chat here. Okay, this is so interesting because Devin's sharing like the body heating up and Chelsea's saying she's actually shivering. Josh is saying pressure in the head, right? So thank you all for sharing. Jessica's breathing fast, right? And I'm breathing slow. We have some folks experiencing anxiety, nausea, clenching teeth, running hands over their head. So again, someone else is saying in a meeting and someone says something that is frustrating or makes someone upset, their eyes widen and get really big, right? So kind of just like a reaction that's happening in a different part of your body and then feeling the heart racing. So the reason this exercise is important, and I'm so glad, thank you all for participating. I know we just met over Zoom, so I'm really excited you're able to share and be engaged here, is we don't spend a lot of time thinking about this stuff and we have to give our space to do so because now, like you've all identified that. So you might be in a totally different setting, like, the person who is sharing that, her eyes widen and get big and her heart races. Maybe it's a family situation, not even a work situation. You see that happening and you're like, wait, I'm getting frustrated. What's going on? What's my trigger? And it gives you a second to think through it a little more rationally and kind of stop some of that rush to that emotional reaction that you might be having. So with EQ, what's kind of nice is the solutions to build up your EQ skill set and the exercises that are valuable are actually pretty simple. I mean, just taking some time, you know, once a day to feel your emotions physically and kind of think about what your physical signs are. Again, I was showing you that brain science slide. The brain can get better at identifying these things and spotting patterns and can be retrained in a way that you have a deeper understanding of your self-awareness. So I encourage you to try it. You know, it's so simple, but it can really add value. Just like the way I think about EQ, I mean, if you're trying to live a healthier lifestyle and you talk to your doctor and they say, okay, well, walk 3 times a week and add vegetables to your diet, like that is such basic advice, but like that's really going to be transformational if someone keeps that up and makes those small changes. So I encourage you to think about that as we walk through the EQ strategies. And thank you all for sharing those physical reactions that you might be having with a frustrated emotion. I'm going to jump to the next slide here. The next piece is self-management. So you have to know your emotions, right? So we just talked about being frustrated. So I'm sitting there, I'm clenching my fist, I'm shallow breathing. Some of you are getting hot, some of you are shivering. Most people's hearts are racing, it sounds like, with being frustrated. Self-management is what you do with it. So you've identified it's happening, but you're able to decide to act or not to act. You have the ability to use an awareness of your emotions to stay flexible and direct your behavior in a more positive way. And you have the self-control and self-management capacity to put your immediate needs on hold for larger goals. So here's what's interesting about self-management. As I was telling you, some of these things are really simple, but like incredibly valuable. To get better at self-management, one of the best tips I've ever seen is to book a mental recharge on your schedule. I don't mean you need to book like a full yoga session or go to like a meditation retreat for a weekend. Most people don't have time for that. Great if you do. Most people probably don't. But I think what you can do is find little blocks of time on your schedule where you can really give your brain a break. I found it really interesting as I was reading through the EQ book. One of the things I really liked was talking about just using these strategies to give your brain a fighting chance, right? Because your brain, as you saw in the image, is like hardwired to have the emotional reaction first. But the more you can give yourself a chance and give your brain a break and give your emotions a break, the more likely you are to be able to better manage those emotions and have better self-control and be more intentional about what you're doing with those emotions. So again, a good strategy for this is to build a mental recharge into your schedule. I know that for me, I've done the most simple thing. I've been doing 2-minute meditations on an app on my phone. And I'll even do them between career coaching meetings with students, just because, you know, you're highly engaged in a career coaching meeting, and then you want to like pause and step back and refrain. So the next person gets your absolute best, so that your first student is getting the same attention and energy and advice at the same level as, you know, a third student that you see that day. So for me, I try to be intentional about building in opportunities in my schedule to just do quick 2-minute meditations. There's a million apps out there. A lot of them are free because of the pandemic. So, you know, a lot of the premium services are free. So that's something I encourage you to think about. And you want to do what works for you too. So not everyone might like meditation. Some people want to take a walk or a run, or some people want to, you know, bake, or whatever is going to make you feel like you've had a little bit of a mental break, because you just have to give the brain some time to, you know, calm down and have space, basically, so that as you get emotionally triggered, which you will, you've built up your capacity to manage that better. So I'm curious if folks can share in the chat what I was sharing again. So I do a 2-minute meditation app. I'm curious what other things people do to kind of mentally recharge. And I'll put it in here. So again, it pops up for everyone. I'm using the Stop, Think, Breathe app. If you have Independence Blue Cross, their premium content has been free for a couple months due to the pandemic. So I've been enjoying that for free. Chelsea's doing a quick workout. That's actually like literally the best thing you can do when you look at the brain science, because it just really, really takes giving the brain a break to a higher level. Ryan is sharing getting up and moving away, so giving yourself space. Savannah, weightlifting. Flip sharing, which again, like these things are so simple, but make a huge difference. Like just walking around the parking lot, right? Like you don't have to necessarily get in the car, get changed, go to a gym, do this whole thing. Like just, you know, walk in the parking lot, go for a run. close your eyes. I love going for a drive. And Devin, yeah, exercise and trashy reality TV. I mean, yeah, you're just letting your brain escape for a little bit, giving it a break to mentally recharge. So when I think about this again, the idea is simple. We've been hearing forever that wellness and mental health matters and that that's going to make us a better performer at work. Like, that stuff is solid in the research. I think the challenge I invite all of you to consider is, how do you get more consistent at it, right? So instead of, I'm really stressed, so I am going to listen to 2-minute meditations, I'm kind of preempting it. I'm going to listen to 2-minute meditations every day so that, like, I'm consistently building up my capacity to manage some of these emotions. So for these things that work for you, I encourage you to try. And I know a lot of people, you know, our schedules are less structured or perhaps more structured based on, you know, our employer and what we're doing right now. So I definitely encourage you to consider your current schedule and think through, where can I build in some of these breaks? How can I make it easy? Like, for those of you who, you know, watching the trashy reality TV, like, can you have Real Housewives queued up so you can just, like, hit it ready to go? For those of you who are weightlifting, can you make sure those weights are nearby? Because sometimes the barrier is just, well, now I got to go set this up and go do this, and you miss the opportunity to build that recharge into your schedule. But it really can help build up your ability to manage your emotions and the personal competence piece of EQ. We're going to move then into talking about the other two skills of EQ. These other two skills of EQ are related more externally. So it's your ability to read the emotions in others, and then it's your ability to manage relationships with others based on your own emotional intelligence and understanding of their emotions. So social awareness, this one, you have friends who can do this, or maybe you can do it. This is the person that your best friend says, yeah, I'm fine. And you're like, I know that they're not fine. I'm picking up on their body language. I'm picking up on their tone of voice. You're hearing what's not being said. This is something we learn a lot about in coaching and counseling, right? To be effective in those kind of professions, you need to listen, you need to observe, you need to be present and stop the internal monologue. I think that's the hardest one, stopping the internal monologue. We're already in a go, go, go culture, and we're almost always thinking someone's talking to us and we're thinking about, what am I going to say back, right? So you constantly have this stream of thoughts through your head. So you're kind of like, you're not talking out loud, but you're almost like interrupting them kind of in your head because you have this internal monologue going. So I think if you're able to challenge yourself to, in your next conversation with someone, to really listen, really observe what's going on, make eye contact, observe their body language, try not to be on your phone and multitasking. I know everyone's doing it, but again, this is the way you're going to pick up on emotions better. And again, trying to stop that internal monologue. And again, as I was saying, EQ is a skill, so you're not going to be perfect at doing all of these. I'm not perfect at doing all of these, but the more you do it, the better you'll become, and it'll become a bit more of a habit as far as social awareness. The strategy I like the best is to watch body language, so kind of a challenge to all of you here. Not everyone's going to have body language as obvious like this. Like, this guy's clearly having a bad day at work here, pretty obvious. But a lot of what we communicate is unsaid. It's our body language, it's our tone of voice. It's even more challenging to tell some of those things when we're having meetings virtually, right, and not in a physical space with someone. But I would encourage you, if you're looking to build up your social awareness skill set, my next step would be to challenge yourself for the next 7 days. Watch the body language of folks that you interact with. You know, kind of like you're being an anthropologist, right? You're just like observing. It's going to train you to be better at observing these things in the long run. It's just right now you have to be intentional about it because it's not natural. So you can do this with family, you can do it with friends. If your only trip right now is to the grocery store, you can try to do it with the cashiers and the other customers, right? But just try to think through what's their body language communicating, and just being more observant about that is going to build up your social awareness skill set. So I definitely encourage you to do that. It's going to really be instructive if you're leading a team or just, you know, an individual contributor working in a team space, because if you can pick up on your coworkers' body language, I mean, that's just really going to help you have more empathy for what they're going through and able to be more supportive and more connected to your team. So again, this would be my challenge. There's, I think, 66 strategies out there to raise emotional intelligence, but this is one of my favorite ones. We don't usually do it, so we have to be intentional about it, but I'd encourage you to give that one a try. The final piece of the EQ skill set is relationship building. And relationship building is your ability to use your awareness of your own emotions and of others to really manage successful interactions. Now, sometimes this can be, in a formal setting, like a manager giving performance feedback. Certainly, this is a needed skill. But it happens all the time. I mean, one of the best strategies to build up your relationship building skill set is just kind of reflect on what hasn't gone well. And a great way to do that is this intention and impact exercise. So I encourage all of you, sometime today when you have a little space to think, to consider the last time your intention didn't match your impact. So a work example could be you made a comment to a group discussion at work. You meant for it to be constructive or helpful, and that was not the impact, right? Someone got defensive, or it led to a disagreement or conflict or something like that, and you're sitting there like in your head being like, oh my God, that's like not at all what I meant, right? Or in a personal relationship, you thought you were being helpful to your, spouse or partner or friend, and it turns out like they didn't think you were being helpful. They felt like you were micromanaging them or something, or coddling them. So I encourage you to kind of think through personal or work examples about where there was that mismatch, where you had like really good intentions, but it just didn't land well, right? Because the more you're aware of that and really critically are honest with yourself and think through why did that happen, it raises your awareness and your ability to change that in the future. So again, I really encourage you, that I think is one of the best strategies, is just to have some of that reflection around that potential misalignment between intention and impact. So those were the 4 EQ skills. Again, so the idea is you're building up your own self-awareness, right? You have to know what's going on with you first. You have to understand your triggers. A good way to understand that is to reflect on what your physical reactions might be to an emotion. The second piece is the self-management. What do you do with it? And again, this is a skill, so you're just trying to build up your capacity to manage these emotions. So things like building in a mental break or recharge can really be helpful. And then again, you're thinking through these more externally centered skills, your ability to pick up on emotions, have empathy, to be an active listener, try observing body language, and then your ability to really put it all together and think through how that really can help you build effective relationships. So those are the skills, really important for all of us as individual contributors. But I also wanted to spend some time talking about leaders and how this is showing up in leaders. So one thing to share is, leaders have always, when you think back to hunter-gatherers, when you think back to kings in the Middle Ages, leaders have always had an emotional task as a key component of their leadership. It's primal. It's really their first skill. People aren't going to follow them. People aren't going to feel bonded or connected or taken care of if the leader hasn't focused on this really emotional task of managing the emotional reality of the folks in their group. So it's really been around forever. Leaders, though, kind of have I'd say emotional intelligence superpowers. We can all sway the emotions of others, but leaders really can, and they can really have some positive or negative effects on a group dynamic or a work outcome. This has to do a little more with some brain science. Some ideas that are really grounded in these concepts of open loop system and mirroring. So when I talk about these, what I mean by these is open loop means that unlike our cardiovascular system, that it regulates ourself, it's self-regulated. Open loop, we actually regulate the emotions of others. This is kind of evolution, it's designed so a mother will be able to help a crying baby, right? And there's an incentive that you can actually soothe and help other people. So our emotional systems are open and regulated by others, which is different than most of our physical systems. And then there's this mirroring effect. Mirroring means, and I'll give you an example, It's kind of like this contagious effect of emotion. So I like this example of there's some research on 3 strangers who are just like sitting on a bench in a park, not saying anything, not talking to each other. They didn't know each other. And what the researchers found is the person who currently was experiencing the strongest emotions like spread that to the other 2 people, and they hadn't even met. So there really is this contagion effect, and the reason it is magnified with the boss is if you think about a recent team meeting you've been in, I mean, the boss might be at the head of the table. The boss probably is allocated more speaking time. Everyone watches for the boss's reactions. So there's just more focus on the leader. And so they have more ability to spread their emotions in a positive or a negative way. Research has found that 20 to 30% of business performance is actually connected to climate, right? When you think about business outcomes and team outcomes, and the influence that leaders have is between 50 to 70% on shaping that climate. So it's a pretty big responsibility around EQ for leaders, and it just becomes an even more critical skill set. There are some characteristics of emotionally intelligent leaders. So these are similar to the EQ skills we talked about individually, but just even more important for leaders. Self-aware leaders are honest with themselves, about themselves. They really spend that time and are doing that work to reflect and not act impulsively, again, because of that contagion effect. And similarly, no leader, when you think about self-management, is able to afford to be controlled by a negative emotion. Like, who wants to spread a negative emotion to their team? Like, what's that going to do to morale and productivity? So it becomes even more important for leaders to practice what's called emotional hygiene. So similar to building in those mental breaks and doing other things to make sure that they're not spreading these emotions in a way they don't intend to their colleagues and their teammates. Socially aware leaders, these are those managers and leaders who can really pick up on what's going on with their team, right? You hear about managers who like they're the last to get the bad news, or they're like so surprised that someone left a team they thought they were so happy, and everyone else is like, oh my gosh, this was so obvious, so-and-so was unhappy, right? Or this wasn't going well. But for socially aware leaders, they're not surprised. They're really attuned to the emotions of their team, and that gives them the ability to change course, react appropriately, and coach employees and manage them through what might be going on in the team dynamic. So to be really good at this, empathy is key. And some of those skills, again, that we talked about to build our own social awareness, like watching body language, doing some challenges where you're really trying to be present, where you're really trying to stop that internal monologue, is going to help leaders really scale up their ability to be attuned to their team emotions. And the best leaders, they're really good at relationship management in the sense that they can understand what's going on. They understand their own emotions. They understand the team emotions. They can actually leverage this to get people excited about a common mission and really rally around them, set some vision, bring some energy. Because leaders, while they can direct negative emotions, they can also spread positive emotions. And that can definitely lead to productivity gains that we'll talk about. This can really be defined as resonance versus dissonance. So dissonant leaders, these are the leaders, they're out of touch with feelings in the room, they don't empathize, they're causing distress and a negative contagion effect. And it's certainly gonna lead to more poor performance and distress and have that spiral. So these are the type of characteristics that emotional intelligence really can help mitigate, because when people get better at empathizing, reading the room, and not spreading these negative emotions, they're going to have better outcomes in their own work and with their teams. This is kind of the goal, right? Resonant leaders. So they're attuned to people's feelings. They can actually amplify and direct positive emotions. They can create inspiration. They can improve performance outcomes and team dynamics. They can help a team bond together better and rally around a common mission. And they're still being intentional here. So this isn't just the person who like has charisma, right? That happens, right? People are just, they want to follow them because they're high energy or whatever it is, they're visionary. This is more strategic. This leader is really being intentional about, okay, I understand what's going on here related to emotional intelligence, and I'm going to use that to drive some of my strategy around how I'm leading my team. So this is really the goal, and the optimal is to achieve that resonant leader state. There are leadership styles that are connected to this. So it's interesting when you look at leadership styles, you have visionary, affiliative, coaching, and democratic. These leadership styles are typically associated with higher emotional intelligence. And it makes sense, right? If you're a democratic leader and you're leading from a place where you're actually trying to build consensus and understand what everyone thinks and their perspective, that's buffered by an emotional intelligence skill set. There are two others, commanding and peace setting. What's interesting about those, I mean, they're what they sound like, commanding, that's the leader, they're telling you what to do. They're very directive. Peace setting is the high performer who's been promoted. So it's like the sales leader that's now managing the sales performer who's now managing the whole sales team and is just kind of applying those same principles that made them successful as an individual contributor to being a leader. And so I think those two are typically associated with dissonant leaders, but sometimes if you're really emotionally intelligent, you can actually apply commanding and peace setting in a positive way carefully because you have this skill set. So even if you think about commanding, like in a crisis situation, democratic leadership style might not work. You need someone to, quickly make decisions and move forward. But if they have a good awareness of how that's going to impact the team, it's going to impact their delivery and their strategy and kind of sharing those commands and, putting on that leadership style for a bit. So again, it can be interesting that it's even embedded within leadership styles, and then emotional intelligence leads to, leadership styles that tend to be more successful, but also mitigates negative effect when a leader may need to use a commanding or pace setting style given a unique situation. So I've done a lot of talking, but I hope you got some good information. As I said, with graduate students especially, you have a lot of good experiences to share. You've been in the workplace. I know you've experienced some of these things on your own. Maybe you just didn't have the exact language for it yet. So what we're going to do, we're going to jump into breakout rooms for about 15 minutes, and we're going to talk through these questions as a group. And so Rita is going to lead one of the sessions, and I will lead the other. What I'm curious about, we talked about leadership styles, we talked about this contagion effect of leaders, so I'm curious to have each of you share in the discussion group if you've seen a leader in your current role or in previous roles really impact the team performance and mood in a positive or negative way. And if you can identify someone who fits into a category of a dissonant or resonant leader, this could be personal, professional, it could also be like in the media or celebrity, someone who you just think has those qualities. And then the other piece, we're not all leaders yet. Maybe some of us are really top performers though, and I think for any of us, we want to build up our EQ skills, right? Because again, that's a key differentiator. So I talked through those 4 EQ skills. So again, self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. I'd like you to think about which EQ skill you're going to work on and how. I teach a professional development course for a Master's of Science in Finance students, and they actually had to do a reflection paper on this as part of our class. So they basically, for 7 days, they had to pick an EQ skill to work on and a strategy and write about how they managed it. And I was like pretty surprised, and when I read their papers at the end of the semester, like it really did make an impact for these students, especially because it aligned with a challenging time of the pandemic and finals for them. So like they really found value in the exercise. So certainly not assigning papers here, but I really encourage you to think about which of those 4 you want to work on. People usually have a gut feeling at which one might be their lowest, or just one they want to pursue some change in. And then how you're going to work on it. Is there a certain strategy you're going to try to do over the next 7 days to build up that skill? Hopefully you can also still see my screen, and this kind of wraps up what we were talking about. We talked about emotional intelligence in the context of individuals and leaders, and it sounds like everyone in the breakout sessions also had some conversation around emotionally intelligent teams and what that looks like. We've all heard it, right? 2 heads are better than 1. Groups generally at a task will outperform individuals. But that only happens when they're emotional intelligence and really able to build an environment where they can leverage the creativity and skill set of that group in a cohesive way towards a common vision. So again, teams should on their own strive to be self-aware. So not just the individual members, but kind of really have a thoughtful self-awareness around what is the emotional reality of our team, what is our norms, what are our culture, what are our pain points, what are the positives, but just to kind of sit there with that awareness and to practice social awareness towards other teams. So this really comes in a sense around empathy. So considering maybe you're working on a cross-functional team and just doing a little bit more to consider their perspective, their constraints, their barriers, their concerns, and just have that awareness almost as if they were another person when you're practicing that. The more empathy you can build with another team in your in your business, the more successful you'll be. And I'll encourage you to think about that just as a challenge in a way of, if there's a team where things aren't going well, like perhaps your mission, your goals, your timeline is always at odds with that other team's, but you guys need each other to get a goal done, that might be the place to consider applying some of those self-awareness strategies more broadly to that other team. And again, those leaders who have the best emotional intelligence can really head this up, and they can really help teams process emotional reality and embrace change. But we can all be leaders too, and we can all influence our teams as individual contributors by applying some of these EQ skills that we discussed today. We talked about spreading positive emotions as resonant leaders and also just ourselves to other team members. So again, just to remind you, research shows that optimism and positive emotions lead to like these really great outcomes. Creativity, ability to solve more complex problems, better job satisfaction and retention, and this hope and belief in the ability to achieve a goal, right? It's motivation. So it's not just that positive emotions feel good, they do, but again, it's associated with these outcomes that really lift an organization towards reaching their objectives. So again, it becomes a critical management and leadership skill. As we think about a few trends and next steps, so I always like looking at trends. One of them is that EQ goes down in a recession. So I don't know what's happening with the economy, not an expert on that, but I can tell you, right, there's more stress. People aren't at their best, right? There's pressure. So this is a really good opportunity for you all to consider, knowing that that's happening, knowing that that's a trend, to not contribute to that statistic, but to really turn it the other way and say, I'm going to be intentional. I know this is a different time with some different pressures, to make sure not only my EQ doesn't go down, but I'm actually intentional about building it up. There's some interesting trends on generations and gender. So folks always ask, are some generations more emotionally intelligent than others? It's true. The baby boomer generation, technically, when you look at skills, they are more emotionally intelligent. They're scoring higher than millennials, but it isn't what everyone always thinks. It's not because millennials had phones and everyone got a trophy. It's not that. They found the cause is actually just experience. They found that the older generations have had more time to learn how to use self-management skills to become more socially and personally aware of their emotions and to build more positive relationships. Same thing with men. It's really interesting. Women used to outscore men on all of the EQ skills, but what actually ended up happening as culture shifted and it became more appropriate for men to share emotions and not be perceived as weak, so that dynamic shifted, men have actually started to catch up to women on EQ. The reason I like these stats is I actually think it's hopeful, because what it means is, like I said at the beginning, this is a skill, it's not hardwired, right? Older generations are doing better because they spend more time on this. And men are doing better because now they're paying attention to this and they have a place where they feel comfortable doing this reflection and really thinking about and focusing on their emotions. So it's hopeful to all of us that, again, if we're interested in building up our EQ, the research says that you just need to really spend intentional time on it over and over again to practice and build it up. If you're looking to get a deeper, authentic dive into EQ as far as your own EQ skills, I know we all have a pretty good guess of where we might be falling on some of these. There are formalized assessments. You can also solicit feedback through a 360 process, or even through colleagues, supervisors, direct reports, to really get a sense of how you're coming off on each of these skills and where you may need to grow and where you're strong. Again, I challenge all of you to think about one EQ skill. Again, we have self-awareness, self-management, social awareness and relationship building. I encourage you to think about one of those to work on in the next 7 days. And I encourage you to do it in a way that embraces your learning style. For some, you'll want to look on YouTube and read a lot of videos or watch a lot of videos about EQ. Others are going to look at Harvard Business Review articles. Others of you just want to experience it, right? You're just going to try hands-on today. You're going to start reading people's body language. So in order for it to be most effective for you, I encourage you to think about your learning style when you're considering building up a skill related to EQ. And then I encourage you to consider stealth learning. Stealth learning, it's really you're just embedding this practice in your day-to-day. So I was reading about a leader who wanted to build up his EQ. He wanted to become better at coaching and empathy. So instead of like taking a class on it, he actually just ended up coaching his daughter's sports team. So he like embedded it in his day-to-day because he was already so busy to take on something else more formal. And then you're almost just practicing without even thinking about it. So I encourage you to think about those opportunities for stealth learning related to EQ as well. So these are some thoughts here. Again, I think a really good next step is to think about which skill you're going to build up and focus on. And like I said, the students in my class did seem to have some success with setting a 7-day goal for themselves and trying to be accountable. When we think about EQ, you know, I know we spent time on this topic today, and I'll give you some time for questions at the end, but I did also want to let you know about an event we're doing tonight. So again, Rita and I were really excited to deliver virtual programming to our graduate students this summer. We've been doing virtual programming for a while because we have graduate students who might already have been online or are working professionals who coming to an in-person session is just really challenging. So we're excited about tonight. We're actually hosting a virtual golf clinic. For those of you who are local, it's at Overbrook Golf Club is the golf pro who's doing it, which is right by Villanova. And she's going to teach us golf tips and skills from our living room, basically. So she has a pretty cool setup. So you're welcome to take a picture of the slide with your phone. You don't need to register, but the Zoom link is right at the bottom if you're interested. You're absolutely welcome as new students to join and be part of this event. You do need like something you can hold, she was saying. So a golf club, a spatula, a hairbrush, something that you could practice the swing with. So just a heads up that we're doing this. You'll see us rolling out a number of programs similar to these. Some are focused on technical aspects of the job search, right? We're gonna help you build up your resume, learn how to network within Villanova, get best practices on virtual presence. Others are going to be more community building, like virtual golf clinic, or I know Rita just did some virtual trivia programming. So again, I just wanted to give you a heads up. This is coming up tonight if you'd like to join. But again, shifting back to the EQ, I was just curious, did anyone have questions, anything I can answer? Comments, you're absolutely welcome to just unmute yourself or participate in the chat, whatever is going to work best for you. But I'd love to hear any final thoughts before I give you back the balance of your time here.
Lauren, I had a quick question.
Yeah.
Is that other clinic going to be recorded as well?
We are recording the clinic, so I can absolutely, okay. I can ask my colleague, Nick, who I know is arranging a lot of these, to share out the slides and recording of this session, as well as I can share the golf clinic link as well in the recording.
Because I'll be golfing while that.
Oh my gosh, you'll actually be golfing.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
I'm interested to see it, yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Ashley's great. She's done some in-person golf clinics first before, so this is our basically approach to doing something virtually, but she was demoing it for me yesterday and I was pretty impressed, so I think we'll all learn something.
Awesome.
Anything else? I see a chat coming up, so I'm just looking here. Yeah, again, Rita, like it was great to virtually meet everyone here because we look forward to working with all of you as part of the career and professional development team. Anything else I can answer for folks?
Hey, Lauren.
Yeah.
I was wondering, are there any books or articles on EQ that you'd recommend looking into?
Yes, there are. And what I will do, I will send them out. There's 2. And if you can see it on my video, hold it up. The first is we have Emotional Intelligence 2.0. that's the one I would start with. Emotional Intelligence 2.0, what it actually does is it walks you through 66 different strategies. So I talked about a few today, but what it actually does is it says, here are like the 16 strategies for self-management or self-awareness. So it goes through those. That's what we based a lot of the programming off of today. And there's actually in the back of the book, there's a code, so you can actually take an EQ assessment as well. And I'm ducking out of the video here to just plug in my laptop charger. Don't want to accidentally end the meeting for everyone. But Emotional Intelligence 2.0, it's by Travis Bradbury and Jean Greaves. They're really, I would say, this is kind of the most broadly used. People are usually aware of this book, but it lets you do, again, the emotional intelligence appraisal. It's only like 20 questions online. It's amazing that they've been able to identify EQ skills off like such a short series of questions. And what's nice is you actually, when you buy the book, you get access to take the assessment twice, which I think is cool because, again, we talked about this as a skill. So you can take it kind of as a pre-test almost, read the book, put some strategies into practice, and then take the assessment again and kind of see where you're falling there and if you've been able to kind of build up that skill as you were intending. So that's the first one. And then the one where we drew a lot of the leadership content, again, it's called Primal Leadership. Primal Leadership, it's by Daniel Goleman. And again, I can share this with Nick because I know you registered through him, and I can send out the links if you're interested. And that one is more about the leadership and team components of EQ. So really there's the book that's the kind of general baseline, which is the Emotional Intelligence 2.0, and then the book that's more focused on EQ leadership. So I'll share those out with all of you just so you have them as references. Any other questions or thoughts? Well, it was absolutely wonderful meeting everyone. I'm definitely someone who likes to get to know students, so it was nice to be able to do this virtually and connect. I'll make sure Nick also has my contact information, so if you have any other questions, including things related to other aspects of career and professional development, Rita and I will really be the two career coaches and career program team that you'll be working with at Villanova. So again, thank you so much for joining. I know we all just met, so I really appreciate how engaged and how much everyone was willing to share. It definitely makes a good session for everyone. So thank you again. Lovely meeting everyone. I'll go ahead and end the meeting here, and we'll make sure that you get that follow-up information about the books. And again, feel free to take a quick photo of the golf flyer if you'd like to join us online tonight and practice some golf from your living room. So take care, everyone. Nice meeting all of you.